Lighting, lighting, lighting. Now, I know lighting can be very, very difficult to do, especially if it's their first time doing video production. I mean, where do you place the lights? What kind of light should you get? It's just a bunch of questions, not many answers, but we are going to help you answer those questions. And by we, I mean my good friend Jeven Dovey, who is an amazing adventure filmmaker. We've teamed up to make this series about the basics of video production. And so if you want to watch all those videos, then make sure to check out the link in the description below. All right, so I'm gonna kick off this video by giving you tip number one, and that is three-point lighting. Now, in the filmmaking world, in the world of video production, there are many different types of lighting setups, but a very common lighting technique is called three-point lighting. Essentially what that is that there are three sources of light that will make the subject or the object of a given scene stand out. For example, in this setup, my main key light is the Aperture 120D Mark II attached with the Light Dome Mark II to give me that soft looking light that a lot of filmmakers like to have. It's really the main light in this office that's not only lighting me up, but also lighting up different parts of the room. That's my key light. The second source of light is called the fill light, which is typically found opposite of the key light. So for example, in this setup, my fill light is actually this little light over here. It's the Aperture MX with a teal gel on it, just because I wanted a splash of color in my composition. All right, let's put this back over here. So here it is with the light. Now I'm gonna turn it off. And here it is without the light. Oftentimes, the fill light is not necessarily an actual light itself, but sometimes a light bouncing off an object like a reflector or a bounce card, for example. All right, so I have a reflector right over here. This is a 32-inch reflector that you can find in any typical photography store. And basically, I'm bouncing light from the key light just to fill up my face a little more. So see that right over there? So that is the fill light. Here it is without it. No fill, giving me a nice contrast. But if you do want to fill up the face a little bit more, then add in a reflector. The third type of light is called the backlight or the hair light. And that light is typically positioned behind the subject to give this nice rim of light behind an object or a subject. I don't have a backlight right now, but let me show you what it looks like. Hold on, here we go. I'm gonna use good old lightsaber. Okay, here we go. Oh, in case you're wondering, this is the Westcott Ice Light 2, and if you want to check out links to gear, then check out the links in the description below. All right, here is the light right there. Let's lower it. All right, just for example. Okay, let's sit back down. Oh, hold on. Ooh. Okay, so that's the backlight, and as you can see, it creates this nice rim of light behind me, and what that does is that it creates separation from the background. I don't blend so much with my surroundings now. I actually pop because of that backlight. And that essentially is three-point lighting. You have your key light, you have your fill light, and you have your backlight. Now, you can also break the rules. That's right, break the rules, meaning that you don't have to have a three-point lighting setup every single time. If you want to have a two-light setup, great. If you want to have a one-light setup to add more of a dramatic effect, great. The whole point of filmmaking is to learn the rules so that you can break them should you need to. Now, I know these are fancy lights, and so maybe some of you may not have these lights, and that's okay, because later in the video, I'm gonna show you how to use natural light to light up your videos. But for now, I'm gonna hand it off to Jeven, who's gonna talk about how to light outdoors.
Hey guys, if we haven't met before, my name is Jeven Dovey, and on my channel, I do a lot of education specifically for creators, whether that's filmmaking tutorials or just helping with creators figure out how to position themselves on YouTube so that they can build a following. So guys, in this section, we're talking about outdoor lighting. You really want to think about lighting outside just as you would think about lighting inside. So you're gonna have your key, you're gonna have your main source. However, you're not gonna have like a light that you're gonna position off to the side of your camera. You're not gonna have all these different tools because you're out in the elements. And a lot of times, if you're in these kind of places, you're not bringing a whole lot of lighting gear, if any at all. So your key light is gonna be the sun. And that's gonna be the most obvious key source because it's the brightest thing in the sky. And you can use it in so many different ways to your advantage to be able to craft good looking light for your video. So one of the tricks to get the best outdoor lighting is to shoot early in the morning or late at night. And this is both for video and photo. You'll see that some photographers have amazing work, and then when you really dig into their style, you'll notice that they always shoot like right before the sun comes up or right before the sun sets, because there's this period of time where the light is just perfect when you're shooting outdoors. It's called magic hour. And magic hour is typically roughly an hour, but it changes depending on where you are in the globe. But it's that period right before sunset, right after sunset, and the same right before sunrise, right after sunrise. So you get the prettiest looking light at this time. Right now I'm shooting in magic hour. the sun is just about to crest that hill over there, but I have a nice soft glow hitting my face, and my background is still exposed properly so that you get a really dynamic looking shot. Now it's definitely cold because it's early in the morning and the sun hasn't risen, so it's quite chilly out here. But one of the best things that you can do for lighting outdoors is shooting in these periods of time. And some of the best looking footage that you'll see here on the platform is from creators who know how to take advantage of this and shoot only within these periods. Because when you shoot in the magic hour, that's when you're gonna get that really cinematic, beautiful looking footage. Okay, I'm gonna switch over to my switch pod just because I want to show you how to use the sky to your advantage. So the first thing is you want to really position your body and your subject. If it's you, you're shooting you want to shoot using the sky where the main source of light, your key light, is hitting you either forwards, 3/4, half, where you get that nice light. Now what you don't necessarily want to always do is shoot with the light behind you, because you have to think background versus foreground. At this period of the morning, you might be able to get away with it, especially if the sun is lower in the sky, because you have a more flat light. And also when you're shooting with clouds in the sky, you're gonna have nice, soft, even light. Even this right now, the sun's about to rise, so my background is overexposing, whereas my foreground looks pretty good. So in this specific lighting scenario, I would turn so my key light, the main source of the sky, the brightest part, is probably about 3/4. And that's when you're gonna get a much prettier look on your subject. Even half looks really good when you have that contrast between both sides of the face. Or a little bit more frontal, if you want that beauty lighting. So you're gonna play with this, and you have to just keep in mind that the sky over there where the sun is rising, that is your main key light. And when it comes to background versus foreground, you can make your foreground look very pretty, but if the background's way too dark, you're gonna distract your audience. You're gonna pull your viewer out of what it is they're watching. And you wanna think ratios. You wanna have a good looking image behind you and in front of you. And even now, in the time that I've shot this little segment, see how that's already starting to overexpose. So I would start moving probably more this way, where I'd have kind of a side light going, but this sky still looks pretty good over here. It's not completely overexposing. Or I'd flip it and go this way, where I have the mountains behind me. The sun's off this way. I still have nice even light on my face, but the background still looks good. So you're always got to be thinking when you're shooting outside, background versus foreground. What are they seeing in the entire picture? And where is the brightest part of the sky in position to your subject? Use it as your key main source, just like you would if you were inside doing lighting with, you know, all the different lights and you had everything at your disposal. Now, I want to talk about hard lighting, because as soon as the sun rises, you're going to have the sun directly on you. So I want to show you some tricks on how to shoot when you're not in this kind of a scenario. And this is like a really bad example of how you want to shoot outside. Sun's hitting me right in the face, and you see I have this dark shadow. Even with my hat off, I have dark circles around my eyes because the sun's just hitting me directly. You want to avoid all direct sunlight like this, just right on your face. It only really works when, you know, you have a soft source. Like direct sunlight like this just looks really bad. So avoid direct sunlight on your subject. Sometimes your best option is to just find some shade. So I found this rock to cover me. So now my face has a nice, soft, even light across it. Background might not be as good, but sometimes this is really gonna save your shot instead of being out in the direct sunlight where it looks really bad. Now, one thing to think about when you're in the shade, you wanna make sure that your face is pointed towards where it's brightest. So over that way, there's a ton of rocks and it's bouncing some light into my face. Whereas if I was to like face a rock, obviously that's super overexposed and my face is super underexposed. So you really have to be thinking about, you know, where the light source is coming from. If it's from that direction, then I really should be putting my face towards that exposure source. Whereas if I'm facing something that's dark, there's no light coming out of it, then you're not gonna have very much light on your subject and it's gonna look really bad. And you can just tell the difference between here and here, how much better the subject looks on camera.
Thanks, buddy. A little jealous that you're in the mountains right now. Just a little bit jealous. Maybe a lot of jealous. Okay, so we talked about 3-point lighting, how to light outdoors, but How do you light when you have to film indoors? Well, to light indoors, simply use natural light. And to do that, you have to film by a window. Filming by a window if you're indoors is probably one of the greatest hacks when it comes to lighting. For one, it looks natural, the light is clean, and it's probably the best way to light on a budget. Usually the lighting is soft on the skin, making for a pleasant image, and the light fall off in the background is, well, natural. All right, guys, let's switch things up. So if for some reason you just can't film by a window and use a natural light to light up the scene, then at the very least, you can use a typical house lamp as your key light. Now I'm gonna pull out a little bit wider so you can see, but lighting up my face, I'm actually using your typical ordinary house lamp. And because there is a lampshade on it, it almost acts as a diffusion, if you will. And so it'll give me that really nice soft lighting on my skin. Now, pro tip, you don't have to end it right there. We can use a little technique that we learned earlier from this video and use our good old reflector to bounce some light coming from this house lamp. And so if I position it about over here and do my best to bounce the light coming from the lamp, it should look pretty good and should illuminate my face a little more. There, what do you think? Before? After. Lighting. And honestly, this is just a really good example of how you can be resourceful to have good lighting if you don't have access to professional lights. You can use the natural light coming from the window, and if you can't do that, then at the very least, you can just use a typical, ordinary house lamp. All right, Jeven, back to you.
So this next section is all about your background lighting. So right now I'm only lighting myself by one key source. I have my Aperture 120D, and this is the main light for me. Now you can expand on this and create more depth by doing like a hair light and maybe a fill light. But with this section, what I really want to show is how you make interesting background lighting. And there's a few things you need to think about. Number one is ambiance, number two is light motivation, and number three is creating a creative look. So with light ambiance, what you want to think about is, do you want to have the background lighter or darker than your foreground? So right now I have no light in my background. So to demonstrate this background, I'm going to use a Fresnel light that I have. This is just an LED light, and I'm going to point it at a wall. So over there I have a wall that's not black because the ceiling's black, so I can't really use that right now. But I'm going to pump this up and bring up the general ambience in the room. So now what I did is I'm pointing my light at the wall, and it's filling some light in the background, so it's bringing up the general ambiance. So ambiance is one of the things that you need to think about when you're creating a look in the background. The idea is that you're going to create two pools of light. So me in the foreground, that's one pool of light, and your background is a completely different pool of light. And that's why I showed you at the beginning what it looks like to only light me and the background's completely dark. So all I'm doing when I added this one light and bouncing off a wall is I brought up the general ambience of the room. And you don't have to use a light for this. If you have a window, you might be able to open your blinds a little bit and it will bring up the general light in the room. The easiest way to bring up the general ambiance is soft, even light. So bouncing off a ceiling, off a wall, or opening a window. All right, so let's talk about light motivation. So in your background, you can add different practical lights. Those are things like lamps. And when you use these, you can turn them on to not only give your background some more visual interest, but also bring some more light into the scene. So right now I've added a lamp and it's illuminating the ceiling a little bit, but it also creates some sort of visual interest. So you can use different practical lights in your background to give some light motivation. Whether that's a lamp, or if you had like a window in your shot, you could open your window and then let some light spill in. Especially if you're shooting different times of day, you can have the direct sunlight coming in and add some streaks across the background that does look really good. So the next part I want to talk about is creative lighting. Now, one trick that I like to use is taking a hard light like this Fresnel and doing something like adding a streak or a splash of light to the background. Now this has completely changed the look of this shot from completely black background to some light motivation over here and a streak of light over here. Another really cool thing when you have a hard light like a Fresnel is that you can put it through different objects, so like textures, and create patterns on the background. All right, come over here with me, and now we're in the scene that I've built here in my studio, which is this kind of standing set. I'm gonna flip off this hard light in the background, and right now we're just being illuminated by my key light. So I'm gonna switch on a few background lights. So now I've illuminated two different panels with lights from the ceiling behind this geodome thing that I've built. And using lights like this are called specials. So you're using one light to illuminate one object in your background. Now, I would also add a hair light. This is going to create separation from your foreground to your background. So I've just turned on a light that's up here, and you always want to think separation. So when you're shooting, you have two pools of light. You always want to have your foreground lit differently than your background. So if I was completely to turn off my foreground, then the background would still be lit. And the idea is that you can control both areas so that they're independent of each other. And when you switch out a light, say in the background, it's not going to completely throw off your shot. Now, one last thing I want to talk about is colored light in the background. These are the lights I use. They're just like a little light panel and they're RGB. So they do a ton of different colors. And for me, I use it to just illuminate all the wood look in the background, give it a little orange. Now you see a complete different look than when we started. You can use these little lights to add pops of color, or you could use like an RGB color strip to add some color in your background. But the key is to create a background that makes sense for what it is that you're shooting. So always be thinking about subject matter. So what in the background is going to make sense for the kind of videos that you're going to be creating. All right, Sydney, take it from here.
All right, guys, well, that's it for this video. Hopefully these lighting tips were helpful to you. And big thanks to Jeven for giving his advice on lighting. And if you want to follow him on his YouTube channel, then link will be in the description below. Oh, and a friendly reminder, we are doing a series on video creation basics, video creator basics, the basics of videoing, videographying, whatever the title is. We're making a series on just basics of video productions. So make sure to watch all the videos in that series. Link will be in the description below and up over here. But that's it for this video. Don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and bell buttons down below, and I'll see you in the next one.